The storm clawed at the farmhouse, while a phone on the counter woke the dark with a single chime. Ethan Cole answered, and a trembling voice hissed, "They know where you are," before the line died into static. He stood frozen, listening to the wind grind against the pane. A scream tore across the fields, thin and close, then vanished as if swallowed by snow. Ethan said, "Hello?" and the house answered with settling wood and the hum of the fridge. He grabbed a lantern, because the power flickered like a failing heartbeat. On the porch he saw only white and the inked skeletons of trees. At his boots lay a brass locket etched with crooked symbols that seemed to squirm in the lamplight. Ethan said, "Who dropped this?" and the night breathed back cold silence. He pocketed the locket and stepped into the drift, each breath turning to steam and doubt. Far beyond the fence a dark seam of woods waited like a closed mouth. Somewhere inside it the scream still echoed. Silence returned as if the scream had been imagined, but the locket's chill convinced Ethan the night was awake. He shut the door and the house seemed smaller, walls leaning with the wind. The voicemail replayed, a whisper carved out of fear. Ethan said, "Say it again," and the words still stained the air. He searched for any mark on the brass that could be read, but the symbols curled like thorns. A snow thud landed on the roof and slid, dragging his thoughts with it. He wrapped a scarf, checked the deadbolt, then unlocked it again. Doubt was heavier than the coat he pulled on. He packed a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a stubborn courage that felt borrowed. The scream might have been nothing, yet the nothing had left a trace. Outside, the storm arranged itself like a curtain waiting to open. He stepped onto the porch again, and the wind stole his breath like a thief. The snow had thickened, erasing lines that gave the land shape. Ethan said, "If you're out there, answer," and the storm answered with teeth. He lifted the lantern higher, casting moving walls on drifts like dunes. The symbols on the locket glowed only when the light grazed them, then fell dull. He tested each stair for ice, careful as a man learning a lie. The yard gate clicked, a small sound made enormous by fear. He remembered winters when the fields were safe, and the dark was only sky. Now the dark felt occupied. A single path of prints emerged from shadow, crisp and deliberate. They pointed to the woods like an accusation. He opened the gate, and the hinge shrieked like something hurt. The prints were deep, heels biting, toes straight, as if the maker never glanced back. Ethan said, "Why come to the house?" and the question went nowhere. He knelt to gauge the edges, still sharp under blowing snow, recent and wrong. The lantern threw long bars of shadow from the fence, a quiet prison across the drifts. Somewhere a branch cracked like a distant warning. He felt the old fear that had never learned his name returning. The locket warmed, or maybe his hand cooled, and he could not decide which was worse. He lifted his head, and the woods seemed closer. The wind pressed his coat against his ribs, counting them. He took a step, then another, following the accusation. By the time he reached the first trunks, the storm hushed, as if the trees had bargained for quiet. The prints slipped between roots and brambles, with impossible certainty. Ethan said, "I'm here, not brave but honest." The lantern hummed and the locket's edge scraped his palm. High above, the wind combed the canopy, making a faraway ocean from needles and ice. He saw no blood, no torn fabric, only the certainty of passage written in white. The scream felt closer now, not past but paused. He listened until listening became its own sound. A faint metallic tink came from deeper in the dark, like a chain disturbed. He turned the lantern that way, and the prince welcomed him in. He stepped over the threshold of the woods, and let the night close behind. Ethan paused beneath the canopy, snow falling softer, the prints clear as arrows. He muttered, "This is madness," but still pressed forward. The woods muffled the storm, a cocoon of eerie calm. His lantern carved slices of light between trunks, and each shadow seemed to shift when he looked away. He thought of the scream, how it clung like frost to his ribs. The prints grew deeper, as if whoever left them carried a heavy burden or knew he would follow. His breath slowed, mixing with the silence that pressed harder than noise. He told himself to turn back, yet his boots obeyed another command. A gust rattled branches, showering him with powder, and he whispered, "What do you want from me?" The woods gave no answer. From the hollow of a fallen tree came a flicker not his own. One. Ethan froze, lantern held tight. A figure emerged, cloaked in black wool, face half hidden under a hood. The stranger's voice rasped, "You should not be here." Ethan said, "Who are you?" But the answer was swallowed. The stranger stood still, snow building on shoulders, gaze unreadable. They pointed deeper into the woods, where the prints vanished into drifts. "You'll find nothing you want there," they said. Ethan asked, "Then why are you here?" Silence lingered, thicker than the storm. The lantern hummed as if straining to reveal more, but the stranger stepped back into shadow. Ethan's pulse thundered, louder than wind. The stranger returned a step forward, voice softer. "You follow echoes that were meant to stay buried." Ethan said, "I heard someone scream." The stranger's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Or you heard the woods remembering." The locket in Ethan's pocket pulsed with cold, symbols pricking his skin. He clenched it, refusing to ask what they meant. The stranger tilted his head, studying him, eyes catching faint lantern fire. Ethan's spine prickled, unsure if warning or invitation. He said, "If you know something, speak it." The stranger whispered, "Not yet," before turning into drifting flakes, his outline fraying. Ethan reached a hand, but only snow met it. The tracks waited still, insisting. Ethan pushed deeper, stranger gone, yet presence lingering. The prints curved around a cedar and led uphill. Each step burned his lungs, but he followed, boots crunching loud in the hush. He said, "If you wanted me afraid, it's working." A crow startled from a branch, wings scattering snow like black paper. He raised the lantern, light swimming on trunks. A shape moved at the edge, then disappeared. Too fast, too quiet. He froze, waiting for sound, but only dripping melt answered. He wanted to turn back, but the prince urged him forward. Each step was both choice and trap. His heart kept time with the storm above. The hill's crest revealed a clearing where a broken lantern burned faintly, flame too stubborn to die. The snow around it was untouched, no prints except his own. Ethan whispered, "How?" The locket stung his palm, symbols etched deeper into his thoughts. He crouched, studying the relic, glass cracked, oil low, yet fire steady. He said, "Who left this?" But the night swallowed it whole. The flame bent against no wind, a defiance impossible. Beyond, the woods thickened, darker than before. Ethan's reflection warped in the broken glass, a stranger staring back. He realized the storm was quieter here, as if the trees held their breath. He stood, lantern trembling in his grip, and stepped closer to the waiting dark. The path twisted into a hollow where the trees closed like ribs around the snow. A figure hunched near a rock, lantern weak, shoulders tight with fear. Ethan stepped closer, boots crunching. The man lifted his head, revealing a pale face lined with regret. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, voice shaking. Ethan asked, "Do you know what's happening?" The man's eyes darted, as if secrets pressed against his teeth. He clutched a satchel to his chest, knuckles white. Ethan's pulse quickened. This was no stranger lost by chance. The locket throbbed in his pocket, symbols burning sharper. The man's whisper fell between them. "If I tell you, it will destroy us both." Ethan said, "Then silence will do worse." The night waited, heavy with consequence. Ethan advanced, but the man recoiled, fear plain. He muttered, "Someone follows. I hear them even now." The storm had hushed, yet his claim sank into Ethan's chest. He scanned the dark, but saw only trees. "Who?" Ethan asked. The man's lips trembled, but he said nothing, only clutching the satchel tighter. A faint crack behind them snapped the silence, like a step breaking crusted snow. Ethan spun, lantern swinging wide, but shadows stayed still. He whispered, "Show yourself." The woods replied with silence that mocked. The confidante pulled his hood tighter and whispered, "They'll never let you leave." Ethan's hand tightened on the lantern handle, the weight suddenly feeling small against unseen eyes. They moved toward a clearing, but snow half buried a torn scarf, red against the white. Ethan knelt, heart racing. The confidante flinched, looking away. Ethan said, "Whose is this?" No answer came, only dread in silence. He brushed snow aside and found a child's mitten beneath, stiff with ice. The confidante whispered, "The woods take what they want." Anger spiked in Ethan's chest. "This isn't the woods," he snapped. The scarf fluttered in the wind like a flag for the lost. He gripped it, refusing to leave it buried. The storm bent around them, louder again, as if awakened. The confidante muttered, "It begins again," words like a curse meant for no ears. The storm thickened as Ethan stood, scarf in hand, eyes narrowed. "Tell me what this means," he demanded. The confidante shook his head, muttering, "You won't believe." Ethan growled, "Try me." A branch cracked overhead, and both men ducked. Out of the dark stepped a woman, face half hidden beneath a fur hood, rifle slung on her back. She stopped at the edge of the lantern light, calm but wary. Ethan said, "Who are you?" Her answer was sharp. "The only one willing to help you survive this." The confidante hissed, "She lies." The woman's eyes glittered with resolve. Between them, trust was as fragile as the flame in Ethan's lantern. Before Ethan could speak again, a shadow slithered between trees. Heavy footfalls circled them, just beyond the lantern's reach. He whispered, "Someone's here." The ally shifted her rifle, eyes narrowing. The confidante's breath quickened, muttering, "It followed us." Ethan's pulse thumped in his ears, each sound sharper. Snow cascaded from a shaken branch, deliberate, not wind. Ethan raised the lantern high, but the light fell short. "Show yourself," he barked, though fear crept under his skin. The unseen presence moved again, circling. The confidante whispered, "It never leaves once it finds you." The woods bent inward, pressing with unseen intent, every tree hiding menace. The woods thinned into a frozen hollow where broken stones jutted like teeth, half buried under snow. Ethan slowed, lantern trembling. The ally whispered, "This place has a history." The confidante muttered, "Not history. A grave." Ethan's eyes caught carvings on one stone, symbols like those on the locket. His breath hitched, the shapes twisting as though alive. He asked, "What happened here?" The confidante's silence weighed heavier than the storm. The ally stepped closer, brushing snow from a stone, revealing a date long forgotten. Ethan's chest tightened. The scream, the footprints, the lantern, they were not random. Something bound to this clearing had called him here. From behind the stones, a figure emerged, heavy coat, draped, badge gleaming faint in lantern light. The broken authority said, "You shouldn't be here, Cole." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You know me?" The man's expression twisted with guilt. "I know this place, and I know the cost of staying." The ally stepped forward, rifle angled, but the officer lifted a weary hand. "Put that down. You'll only make it worse." Ethan demanded, "Tell me why these symbols keep following me." The officer's jaw worked, torn between confession and silence. Finally he said, "Because they were written in blood long before you were born." Ethan pressed closer, heat rising under his scarf. "What do you mean, blood?" The officer's voice cracked. "Families buried their sins here, then prayed the snow would hide them." The confidante flinched, muttering, "You've said too much." Ethan turned, anger blazing. "Too much?" people screamed tonight. His breath fogged thick, his lantern shaking. The officer looked away, shame carving his features. "I tried to stop it once," he said softly, "but you can't stop what the woods remember." Ethan clenched the locket so hard the edges cut skin. His words bled out between teeth. Then maybe it's time someone tried again. A cry split the clearing, sharp and young. Ethan spun, lantern jerking wide. From the shadows, a girl stumbled forward, hair tangled, cheeks raw with cold. She clutched nothing but terror. The ally hurried, steadying her. Ethan knelt, voice urgent. "Who did this to you?" She shook her head, mute. The officer's eyes widened, haunted. "She shouldn't be here," the confidante whispered, another bystander caught in their snare. Ethan's chest hollowed. The girl's presence meant the danger was no longer whispers and echoes. It was flesh and fear. The storm leaned in, as if feeding on her arrival. The wind died, leaving silence so sharp it rang. Ethan held the girl close, eyes darting at the tree line. Shadows stretched unnaturally, long fingers clawing toward them. He whispered, "It's watching." The ally gripped her rifle, stance rigid. The confidante trembled, clutching his satchel like a shield. The officer whispered, "This is what happens when the past stirs." Ethan felt the locket heat like a brand, symbols pressing into his palm. The girl buried her face in his coat, her sob muffled. For a moment, the clearing seemed to hold its breath. Then a branch snapped loud as thunder, and every head turned toward the dark. The silence broke when the confidante snapped. "You think she came here by chance? She was bait." Ethan turned, fury boiling. "What are you saying?" The confidante's face twisted with shame and desperation. "I led them here. I had no choice." The ally raised her rifle, disbelief hardening her voice. "You betrayed us?" The officer's eyes closed, regret etching deeper lines. Ethan's chest tightened as the girl whimpered in his coat. The locket burned like fire, symbols writhing. The confidante's voice cracked. "They promised to let me live if I delivered you." Ethan's grip whitened around the lantern handle. "And you believe them?" The storm surged, as though mocking his words. The storm roared as another figure stepped from the trees, his smile sharp as glass. "Always predictable," he said. Ethan's heart lurched, recognizing the voice from the voicemail. The villain strode forward, tall and certain, eyes glinting with cruel delight. The ally hissed, "You again." The officer took one step back, guilt tightening his shoulders. Ethan demanded, "Why me?" The villain's laugh cracked like ice. "Because you carry what was never yours." His gaze dropped to the locket, fire reflecting in his pupils. Ethan's hand clenched around it, heat biting deeper. "Then come and take it," he said, though fear thickened his throat. The villain's voice carried like a sermon. "These woods are an altar. Blood seals it, blood feeds it. Your family carved the first offering." Ethan shook his head. "Lies." But the words pierced deeper than he wanted. The confidante whispered, "It's true," shame flooding his tone. The ally spat, "You've killed enough, step back." The villain's grin widened. "Not killed, released." Ethan's lantern sputtered, light flickering as if afraid. He felt the locket's edges grind into flesh, its heat almost unbearable. "If you think I'll be part of this," he said, voice breaking, "you're wrong." The villain's laughter shook the branches overhead, snow tumbling down like ash. Ethan stepped forward, scarf whipping in the wind. His boot struck something hard beneath the snow. He knelt and brushed away ice, revealing a mound of half-buried bones. The girl whimpered, hiding her face. The ally cursed under her breath. The officer staggered, muttering, "Not again." Ethan lifted a skull, snow clinging to hollow sockets. His throat tightened. "How many?" The villain's smile stretched, teeth catching lantern light. "Enough to keep the woods awake." The confidante shook, satchel rattling. Ethan dropped the skull, fury burning. The lantern's flame flared, fighting against the storm, as though answering his rage. From the tree line, another figure appeared, silent, eyes like glass. The silent observer watched without blinking, expression unreadable. Ethan felt every muscle lock. "Who are you?" he demanded, but silence answered. The villain chuckled. Even they know words are useless now. The observer's gaze swept across each face, lingering on the girl. She trembled, burying deeper into Ethan's coat. The ally raised her rifle, but Ethan held a hand. No sudden moves. The storm hushed again, the stillness unbearable. Snowflakes spiraled between them, each one a frozen second stretched too long. The observer turned slightly, a signal or a threat, and the night seemed to lean closer. The clearing tightened around them as if the trees had stepped closer. Ethan lifted the lantern and faced the villain. The ally took a steady breath and shifted her stance. The officer looked ill with memory. The confidante shook like a wire in wind. The silent observer watched unblinking, a winter statue. Ethan said, "End this now, or I will." The villain smiled as if offered a toast. Snow hushed the world to a stage. The locket burned a brand into Ethan's hand. The girl pressed against his side, trying to be smaller than fear. The villain said, "Give me the key, and the woods sleep." Ethan said, "You mean we die?" The observer tilted his head by a hair. The ally said, "Pick a target, and speak." The storm drew in a long breath and waited. From the drift's edge, the hooded stranger stepped into light. His voice was worn thin. The stranger said, "He cannot open it without you." The villain's smile tensed. Ethan said, "You knew this." The stranger nodded once, eyes bruised by years. The officer whispered a name that tasted of old guilt. The confidante stared at the snow like a man reading a confession. The stranger said, "Your family sealed what they feared. Only their blood unseals it." Ethan felt the locket twitch like a heart. The ally said, "So he needs you to finish the ritual." The villain laughed, brittle and bright. Ethan said, "Then the answer is no go." The stranger's gaze held both warning and apology. He said, "Refusal wakes it faster." The storm began to speak again. The lantern guttered, then flared like a warning bell. Ethan said, "We move," and pulled the girl behind the cedar line. The ally covered their break with a sharp command. The officer staggered after them as if the snow resisted him. The confidante hesitated, then ran, breath tearing in streaks. The villain advanced with unhurried delight. The observer followed on a perfect arc, never hurrying, never slowing. The stranger cut a path through drifts like a man tracing old sin. Ethan said, "Left now." And they veered into a gully where the wind died. Branches wove a roof of black ribs. The locket seethed against his palm. The girl whispered a name that was not his. The ally said, "Two on our tail." The woods opened a mouth of deeper dark. They reached a sink of stones crusted with rune scars. The stranger halted as if chain-checked. The officer said, "This is where it started." The confidante sobbed a wordless apology. The ally scanned the ridge for angles and ghosts. The villain stepped into the circle as if into a home. He said, "Open it, Ethan." Snow softened to a held breath. Ethan said, "What is it?" The stranger answered, "A debt." The observer lifted one finger, counting down a silent command. The girl shivered so hard, her teeth made a small bell. Ethan felt the locket align with the carved marks, like a key finding teeth. The officer said, "Don't." The villain said, "Do." The woods leaned to hear the verdict. Ethan stepped into the circle, and the cold deepened into a new weather. The locket clicked against the rune, and the air flexed. He saw a night older than his name, a bargain carved with fear. He heard his blood answer like a door unlatched. The villain whispered, "Yes, like prayer." The stranger said, "Break it before it binds." The ally said, "Tell me how." The officer choked. "A life for a life is the lie they sold." The confidante whispered, "Take mine," and dropped a satchel. The girl hid her face and shook. Ethan said, "No more offerings." He tore the chain free and slammed the locket to stone. Light bled out, pale and furious. The woods screamed with the voice he had heard at the start. The storm collapsed into silence, leaving a hollow world of snow and echoes. Ethan staggered, the broken locket smoking in his palm. The villain lay half buried in frost, face twisted with disbelief. The ally steadied her rifle but lowered it slowly. The officer dropped to his knees, eyes wet with years of shame. The confidante sat slumped, empty satchel beside him, whispering apologies no one heard. The girl pressed her face into Ethan's coat, sobbing softly. Ethan whispered, "It's done," though he knew the woods were only holding their breath. The woods felt thinner now, yet darker truths hung in the branches. The officer rasped, "We buried this long ago." Ethan said, "And it still found me." The ally paced, scanning the trees, unease in her stance. The confidante clutched snow in his hands, muttering prayers without faith. The girl whispered, "I want to go home." Ethan pulled her closer, nodding though he had no idea where home remained. The stranger had vanished, leaving only footprints that led nowhere. The observer stood at the edge, still silent, eyes like shards of winter. Ethan asked, "Is it over?" No answer came, only the weight of silence pressing harder. They walked from the stones, each step dragging, the woods releasing them reluctantly. The ally said, "This isn't done," her voice like flint. The officer whispered, "It never is." Ethan's breath smoked in the dark, his hand raw from the locket's bite. The girl leaned on him, fragile but unbroken. The confidante stumbled behind, hollow, his satchel abandoned forever. Snow covered the bones again, as if the night wanted its secrets restored. Ethan looked back once, the circle already vanishing beneath drifts. He said, "We'll remember," though the storm was already erasing every sign. At the edge of the clearing, the girl broke her silence, whispering, "Something's still here." Ethan froze, staring into the trees. The ally raised her rifle again, scanning shadows. The officer muttered, "It doesn't let go." The confidante shook his head, whispering, "Not yet." The observer remained at the tree line, eyes fixed on them, unmoving. Ethan said, "We leave now," his voice raw. But even as he spoke, he felt it. The sense of being measured, weighed, and not yet released. The storm growled faintly, building its voice again. They turned toward the fields, the farmhouse, a faint ghost beyond the storm. Ethan whispered to the girl, "We're almost there." Her small nod trembled. Behind them the woods exhaled a sound, footsteps, crisp and new, pressing into snow where none had been. Ethan spun, lantern shaking. A single line of prints stretched into the dark, fresh and deliberate. The ally cursed, rifle steady. The officer whispered a prayer, his voice breaking. The confidante fell to his knees, shaking. The observer was gone, only his shadow remained in memory. Ethan's throat closed as he whispered, "It's not finished." The storm rose again, swallowing the world.